So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second program in the Granby Public Library Health and Wellness series. We are delighted to host Anna Kazmierczak, wellness coach and nutrition consultant, for her second program in our series. This is sports nutrition for athletes of all ages and stages. And I know that's a mouthful, but we really wanted to invite all of you, everyone that has an interest in your athletic nutrition needs, to be able to get something out of this program tonight. So again, I'm glad that you're here and you're watching. My name is Holly Johnson. I'm the program coordinator and I'll be your tech host. We are, like I said, delighted to have Anna Kazmierczak here with us tonight to present. She is a wellness coach, a nutritionist, and the owner of Manageable Pieces. And we are going to, of course, have her back again. Tune in again February 9th, Wednesday the 9th at 6:30, because we're going to be doing recipe makeovers that night. So that's going to be fun too. But as far as tonight's programming is concerned, again, sports nutrition for athletes of all ages and stages, whether you're maintaining personal fitness levels or striving to reach the next level in your fitness. Anna's going to be able to give us some really excellent tips and information tonight. So I'm going to turn the program over to Anna, and big warm welcome and thank you for being with us here tonight.
Thank you, Holly, for your warm welcome and the introduction. So welcome everyone to Sports Nutrition, the basics. My name is Anna, and sports nutrition is a passion for me. I have a bachelor's in dietetics and a master's of science in nutrition from University of St. Joseph here in West Hartford. But besides that, I'm really passionate about healthy living, fitness, and sports nutrition. In fact, my master's thesis was in sports nutrition. But I arrived at it not because I was interested in that particular topic on its own, but because I found that feeding my adolescent competitive swimmer was a little more complicated than just feeding him healthy food, which is something that we had always done. So my two oldest boys are both competitive swimmers. They swim at least 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, and then work out on top of that. And while he had always been, my oldest had been eating well, and he's definitely a good eater, what we found was that as he was getting more competitive, he was losing weight. So he was growing in height and losing weight because we were missing something. And so I started looking into sports nutrition and ended up doing my thesis on sports nutrition while getting my master's degree. Because just eating a combination of healthy foods is not enough if you are very active, if you're getting into sports after a long hiatus, or if you want to take it to the next level. So after the master's degree, a ton of research, and creating a sports nutrition program, that there are a lot of moving parts and most of us just don't realize it. So here, what we are going to talk about is a high overview, and I hope to dispel some myths for you, some things that people have questions about as we go through here. It is very high level because what I found is that sports nutrition is complicated, and it does get into the one thing, one of the most important things about it is that sports nutrition is a very individual endeavor. So it's hard to generalize to like everybody because each one of our bodies responds to food and responds to athletic activity in a different way, and understanding that is part of the process. So whether you're just starting out and trying to do something different, whether it's you're hoping to run your first 5K this spring, or maybe you're moving up from that and training for marathons or a 100-mile bike race, or you're a master swimmer trying to continue to compete. Having the right nutrition sort of methodology is going to help you not only reach your goals, but even more importantly, sometimes we forget about this, is prevent injury and maintain your health while doing that. Because if you work too hard and you don't feed your body right, you can cause yourself more injury than you expect. So, having said that, well, let's talk about some of the components. So let's start by talking about the big stuff, macronutrients. And in this case, what I'm simply talking about is those major food components, and that's carbohydrates, protein, and fats. So why are they important? Well, they are important for a variety of reasons, and it's more than just energy. So they provide energy just so you can breathe, so you can move around in your everyday activities, but so you can also perform some of those athletic activities. They do provide that, and they also vary. The amounts vary depending on a lot of factors, like what's your basic activity levels? Does your job require you to sit in a chair for most of the day, and then afterwards you go and you hit the trails and you go for long runs? Or maybe your job requires physical activity throughout the day on a continual basis, and then you're adding additional athletic activity on top of that. All those things make a difference, as does your health status. If you're recovering from an injury, your requirements are going to be different in terms of just even these big components than somebody who is at the peak of their performance. Your age and gender and what your goals are all going to affect these needs for these three major components. And we're going to talk about them a little bit individually later. But besides energy, they are important because they also provide building blocks. They are some of them are stored for future use. So we all know that fat is stored for future energy use. But did you know that we also store carbohydrates in our bodies for use for quick athletic activity? Protein is much more complicated than giving you big muscles, and is actually the major building block of pretty much every hormone in your body, and well, a lot of other things as well. So there are risks associated with not getting enough in total. If you're not getting enough calories, your performance will suffer. Your risk of injury will go up, which makes, let's say, losing weight, if that's a goal, while trying to improve your athletic activity, a very delicate balancing act, because it is so much easier when you're under nourished. It's much more easy. It's easier to create injury, and not all of that can be visible. But if you're getting too much or not enough of one of these macronutrients, it could be a lot more nuanced than that. Maybe inadequate protein intake, or maybe eating protein at the wrong time could prevent you from healing adequately from an injury. So say you tear something, or maybe you just overwork a particular muscle group. If you don't get enough of these different components, it could take much longer to heal and get back to your athletic performance you want. And this is important for whether you are a teenager, in high school, getting ready for a college career that includes athletics, or whether you are an adult, whether you are middle-aged or even older, while the amounts may change based on your activity and your age, all of them continue to be important. So it's a balancing act to make sure that you get enough of each one of these major components to be able to perform well and avoid injury. So there are differences also in how you feed yourself in the off season versus the regular season. So if most of your competitions, if let's say you're a long distance road biker, you're not doing a whole lot of that right now. So this would be your off season. While you may be training on an indoor bike, it's not the same. And so your needs will change depending on the season that you're in. If you're a runner and you run year round, your macronutrients requirements are going to be different in the winter than they are going for winter training than they are going to be in the summer, because you will burn more calories running in the winter than you are going to use in the summer, because your body has the added job of maintaining your core body temperature at higher, at the appropriate amount when the ambient temperature is so much colder. You're losing heat, you have to generate it, and you do that by burning fuel. So it's not possible in this class for me to tell you exactly how much to you eat of what, but as a general guide, when we start creating plans for individual athletes, for CHO, by the way, is carbohydrates. It's the chemical formula. Your requirements are for all of these are generally based on your body mass. So 5 to 7 grams per kilogram of body weight would be the appropriate number of carbohydrates for a person. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about a 100-pound person, there'd still be in that 5 to 7 grams. It's just they would be looking to eat 50 grams if they weigh 50 kilograms, sorry, yes, and so on. So what, and for protein, those requirements are somewhere between, the numbers here are on the lower scale, somewhere between 0.8 to 1.2. That's kind of in the moderately active average person range. For athletes, you'd probably be coming closer to 2 grams. So knowing your weight and body composition is helpful in that. Now, calories, this 20 to 25%, there's no specific amount of fat that we should be eating, because your body is perfectly capable of manufacturing all the fat it needs for storing for whatever future requirement you have. We'll talk about the only kind of essential fats that we can't produce, but in general, fats are kind of like the filler, because they come along with the protein sources, so you get them naturally, and you naturally get in that 20 to 25%. How much all these come out? There are formulas that help us figure that out, and I've noted them here, but there are different ways to estimate it. The important thing to note is that when it comes to sports nutrition, no two of us are alike, because we don't approach our training the same way. Our bodies are different. And so an individual assessment, however you get there, whether you're doing it yourself or with the help of a professional, is kind of the only way to really know what your specific needs are. Because a general formula or something that you find on the internet for the average runner is probably not that great, because I know that you're not an average runner. You're Joe Smith, sorry, the runner, but your needs are very much different from, let's say, Donna, if she's a runner. So that's something one very important thing that I want all of you to remember. And I know this is a bit of an eye chart. I'm not sure how big your screen is, But this is here, I wanted to put the slide here to illustrate just how much of a difference there can be between two people who are doing the same kind of training in the same sport. So if you were to look at running at a 5.5 minute mile, okay, so that's a pretty good clip. And if you weigh 130 pounds, you're probably burning in that hour of running at that pace, you would burn about 1,000 calories. Now, if you are bigger, say you are a muscular man running that same distance, weighing about 180 pounds, you're actually going to burn almost 500 calories more than the 130-pound woman. And you have to account for that in your eating, because that's on top of whatever regular activity you perform. This is extra training that you have to account for when you're planning to feed your fuel yourself. So how does it all work together? I think this is one of the things that in my classes we generally have a lot of discussion on, and that is that carbohydrates, as much as they have been vilified and made to seem like they are bad because they're making us all fat, they are actually the major source of fuel for our body. We run on sugar, glucose specifically. It's the only fuel our body is actually able to utilize to create the energy it needs to function. So everything else you consume, one way or another, gets converted into that fuel. So that is our carbohydrates are our major source of fuel, but they work together with proteins and fats in order for your body to function like a well-oiled machine. Now, here's where I tell you something that's one of the most important things in the presentation, and that none of it works without lubrication, and that's provided by water. So without adequate hydration, this whole wonderful, well-oiled machine simply doesn't work very well. If you don't get enough liquid in your day, if you don't hydrate enough, then no amount of protein, no amount of carbohydrate or fat is going to lead to the best performance. You will struggle. So we are going to talk about hydration and why it's so important. All right, let's talk about the biggest piece of our fueling, sports nutrition fueling theory. Carbs are the fuel for working muscles, but we know that, I've already mentioned it, but they also help us actually digest and carry a lot of other things that we need into our bodies. So they are a vehicle that a lot of vitamins and minerals are transported through. They facilitate the absorption and digestion of proteins and fats as well. So normally those things wouldn't get digested so great, and they kind of end up sitting in our digestive tract until they get a little bit of assistance from different types of carbohydrates and the nutrients that come with them. They help with nutrient and water absorption. So think about fiber and so on. The soluble fiber allows food to move a little slower through your digestive tract, so you're able to get all the best stuff and all the stuff that your body needs. There's plenty of time for it to come out. It also traps the water in it. So because carbohydrates tend to act like sponges, they absorb water. And so instead of the water kind of running through and there being not as much of an opportunity for it to be absorbed by the body, when you consume carbohydrates, you actually provide this assistance in order for the water to be absorbed. I mentioned that carbs are the fuel that we run on, maintaining blood sugar, so the certain levels of glucose in your bloodstream. When you're in that right band, your body has readily available energy. And that's really important from two perspectives. One, there's all this circulating fuel that cells throughout your body, including your muscles, can get at. But there's also the second piece that your brain has this constant, steady flow. And when your brain has a nice flow of energy it can use, it stays alert. And when it doesn't, and your blood sugar drops, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's like your brain stops working. And mental fatigue is not something we think about a lot when it comes to athletics, but mental fatigue can be just as devastating and can be just as detrimental to your performance, if not more so, than actual physical fatigue. So if you're in the right frame of mind, a lot of times you can work through physical fatigue. You can push yourself. But when you're tired, even if there's more get-go in your muscles, it's very mentally tired. It's very hard to continue practicing. So it can be a huge detriment to performance. Carbohydrates also provide the quick sort of action energy source. So that's the energy source where you're not using really like stored fat or anything like that. That's your 50-meter dash or your sprints in the water or some very quick activities. When you first start running, all the energy is coming from this stored carbohydrates. It's not coming from your body converting fat to anything. It's just this easy to get at stuff. So having those stores at their optimal levels is key. Otherwise, you get tired before you even get started. Now, we can't make carbohydrates from something else. So you can't make glucose from other sources, like other than stored fat, but it's very hard to replenish that sort of blood sugar without training your body to do so, how to effectively do it from your stores. It also isn't, our bodies are not designed to get fuel from foods other than carbs when you're exercising. So if you have a high protein bar in the middle of a workout, you're not going to feel that jolt as you would if you sucked on a sugar cube. I know it sounds ridiculous, but bear with me. When you're at that point and you're in the middle of really hard exercise, what your body needs is straight up sugar as fast as possible. So the simpler the carb, the better. Plus, carbs are relatively easy to digest. Think about, how they say carbs take 3 to 4 hours to digest, and protein like 4 to 6 hours, and fat 6 to 8 hours. So have a combination of all three with your meals to keep you satisfied longer. Well, that also means that if you're in the middle of athletic activity, if you eat some of those longer digestive things, either right before or during, it's going to be like trying to work out with a brick in your stomach. Whereas carbs, if you choose the ones that get digested quickly, you get the energy and without any of the sort of side effects weighing you down. There. So there are a lot of foods, but carbs are not, bread's been vilified as well, but carbs are not, they're not the only, grains are not the only source of carbohydrates. We're talking fruits and vegetables and everything colorful that grows on a plant, seeds, legumes, and even nuts actually are sources of carbohydrates. Yes, they have fats. Yes, they include proteins, but there are a lot of other things that go with it. And with so many choices, it's really easy to find the healthy options that give you both. All right, protein. Protein is the building block for a lot of structures in the body. It's not just muscle. You use protein for tissue repair. They are part of immune cells. Growth, a lot of hormones. Those are just some of the things that are made out of that are protein based. Now, proteins are really just complex compounds that are put together from a whole bunch of different amino acids. There are a lot of essential amino acids which we can't make, so you have to eat some sources of protein in order to get this. But what our body does with it is what I think throws a lot of people for a loop. We tend to think, oh, I need stronger nails, so I'm going to eat the kind of protein that is in nails. Or skin, my skin's getting a little less supple with age. So if I consume things that contain collagen, then I'm gonna get more collagen under my skin. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. What our body does is says, yay, somebody ate some protein. So now I can take it and I'm going to break it down into its component parts, into these amino acids, and they're just going to float around in the body until they're needed, depending on where they're needed. So if there's a need for tissue repair, the right amino acids are going to get pulled and sent to the place that needs repair. If we need to make some hormones, whether it's the hunger hormone, or whether it's the one that tells you that you're full, or whether it's growth hormones, if that's the most urgent need, and then I'm going to check my inventory, I've got the right amino acids, send it to the place you need it. And so you can't direct how the protein's used in your body once you consume it. So it really doesn't matter what it looked like when you ate it, because your body's going to use it for what it needs most urgently to maintain its health and survival, which might not necessarily be what you think. The other most important thing is energy, because it's important for survival. It will be prioritized. So if you haven't consumed enough calories from, let's say, carbohydrates, all those floating amino acids will be fair game for providing energy for you to survive. And your body prioritizes where it gets its energy, first from any source of carbohydrates, two from protein, and only third from stored fat. And we have to teach our bodies to actually use stored fat for fuel. So if you're not eating enough calories from other sources, you're not going to be using the protein for, maybe you're thinking you want to build muscle by eating more protein. Some of that is just going to be used for energy. And unfortunately, protein is a very expensive source of calories. And I don't necessarily mean that from the perspective of your grocery bill. Yes, food sources of protein tend to be more expensive. Think fish, meat. Beans are inexpensive, but we eat more of the animal sources, which are more expensive. So from a purely economic perspective, it's more expensive, but it's actually more expensive for your body, because converting protein to energy creates toxic wastes, which your body needs to remove. Otherwise, you could cause yourself permanent damage. So these wastes, in order to be removed, your kidneys have to take care of it. So if you eat too much protein, more than you need, and you're using it for energy because you aren't using enough, your kidneys are working overtime, removing those toxic wastes. And then in order to do that, one of the ways to neutralize it is to dilute it. And so there's a potential to dehydrate yourself if you eat too much protein. So excess protein, if you're not getting enough calories, will be used for energy first. If you're getting plenty of calories and you have all this extra protein, it's not going to be used to build extra muscle, give you great nails and wonderful hair. It's going to be stored as fat for future use. We have a very limited ability to store protein, something very important to remember. And so large amounts of protein at one time is kind of ineffective because it creates these extras we don't need at any given time, which are stored as fat, converted to energy, and then stored as fat. So eating small amounts of protein throughout the day is actually much more, it's much better for athletes or anybody engaging in any kind of sports activity. So I know there's usually a lot of skepticism when people hear this. It's like, well, but if I drink all these protein shakes, etc., I'm going to get more muscle. So I like to dispel the myth. So protein doesn't actually build muscle. What builds muscle are three things in this exact order. One, work. So muscle stimulation. If you don't have that, no amount of eating of protein is actually going to give you bigger muscles. Two, having sufficient amount of calories, especially from carbohydrate sources. Because again, if you're not getting enough of those from carbs, your body's going to use that protein to make sure it has enough energy before doing anything else with it. And three, a steady supply of protein. You need what you need just when you need it. And that means each one of your meals should contain a small amount of protein. It means snacks should contain a small amount of protein. And any kind of a recovery, snack, drink, etc., post activity should definitely contain a small amount of protein. You don't need a huge amount. So the recommendation for the average population is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body mass. In reality, most people get about double that. So the average person who isn't an athlete in any shape or engaging in sports activity in any shape or form is already getting about 1.6. So you don't really need to spend a lot of extra time looking for extra protein sources, especially if you're just starting out. So there are many sources. I've already mentioned that. So your fish, your dairy, your poultry, and other meats, beans, nuts, and seeds are all excellent sources, as is tofu and soy products. Not all of them are high quality protein, meaning that it has all of the 13 essential amino acids that we can't make in our bodies. But you don't have to worry so much about which one has what, because if you eat a variety of protein containing foods, so a variety of beans, nuts, and seeds, and soy products are actually high quality protein. Even if you're a vegetarian, you can generally meet your protein needs. All right, fats. I mentioned fats. So fats are important in that they provide a transport vehicle for vitamins that are fat soluble, such as A, D, E, and K. But we have the ability to make the fats we need, whether it's the cholesterol for our cell walls or the different fats that go along with fat transport proteins and everything in between. We can make all the fat we need except for omega-3 and omega-6 monounsaturated acids. So these are fatty acids. So these are types of fats that you have to get from food. They are essential to our health, but we cannot make them. And they are very, very important for athletes in particular. The other part of that is that the ratio of one to the other, because they have different functions, is also important. We tend in our diets to get a lot more of omega-6 fatty acids than omega-3. but what we really need is a ratio of about 3 to 1. So for every 3 grams of omega-6, we would need, we would need 1 gram of omega-3s. Why are they important? Because omega-3s and omega-6s both affect the way our body produces and deals with inflammation. So inflammation is not all bad. We do need a certain amount of it, and omega-6s actually are, in very basic terms, somewhat pro-inflammatory. Not in a bad way. There's a sort of a control loop, but if you have too much, you could have sort of uncontrolled or a much higher, harder time controlling inflammation in your body. And when you exercise, every time you exercise, there is an inflammatory response. It's, again, not necessarily bad, but that's to, prevent injury and so on. Now, omega-3s, on the other hand, help reduce tissue inflammation and control it. So they work together. So one enhances it, the other one moderates it. And between the two of them, you have just the right amount of inflammation for your body to maintain its safety, for you not to get sick, to prevent injury, without getting it to the point where it makes it easier for you to become injured. They are also, omega-3s are essential for the cycle that allows you to burn stored fat for energy, to convert it to glucose, essentially, is what you're doing. And having the omega-3s helps that, but so does endurance training. So long distance runners, or long distance, really any sports, those people over time become much more efficient. Their bodies become more efficient at converting fat, stored fat, into usable energy during a run. So the average one of us, when we just start running, we're not so great at it. Our bodies are just not designed. Those fat stores, per evolution, are there to make sure we stay alive in times of huge famine. And a run doesn't qualify as a time of huge need. And so turning on that engine takes a little bit of work. And through endurance training, long distance, really any long distance sports or long duration sports, even things like soccer, you start to teach your body how to access that stored energy and fat more efficiently and quickly, a lot sooner. I do want to mention one more thing before we leave fats, is that a lot of us think that, lower intensity, there's a higher reliance on fat stores. So like walking uses more fat than running, let's say, burns more fat. And that is true. However, as the little chart shows, if what you're accounting for is the total calories that you're using, then the picture becomes different. Because yes, you use, let's say when you walk, you use about 80% of your energy comes from fat, but you're only burning 300 calories compared to when you jog or a run, because we're talking about more athletic activity here, where in that same amount of time, you're burning 800 calories. And even at 60%, that's double, right? In terms of calories that came from fat compared to walking in the same amount of time. So I mentioned this because, people a lot of times, they get frustrated with, well, I'm doing all this working out or I'm running and I don't see all the extra padding coming off like it should. If you're endurance training, give it time, because there will come a time when your body will become more effective at it, and you will find that those stored fat stores become reduced and are more readily, they don't stay. as long as possible because your body just gets better at utilizing those engines. So we know, most of us know this, omega-6s come from seeds and nut oils. Omega-3s, the best source is fatty cold water fish. So tuna, salmon, some seeds and nuts and so on, but it doesn't take a whole lot of fish to get what you need as far as your omega-3 requirements. So I mentioned the thing that makes everything run, and that's hydration. And water is something we forget about often when we're training. And we certainly discount just how much of an impact it can have on athletic performance. So something to keep in mind. Dehydration. So dehydration meaning that your body is noticeably feeling on a molecular level the lack of adequate sort of water in your body occurs when as little as 1% of body weight is lost. Okay. At that point, you're not even feeling thirsty. Okay. So there are no obvious signs that you're dehydrated. If you pay really close attention and if you've been training or doing athletic activity for some period of time, you may notice a performance difference, but it's very hard to put your finger on it. So if you're drinking when you are thirsty, when your thirst reflex starts to kick in sometime after the 1%, usually closer to 2% water loss, your performance, you're already behind the curve. Your performance is already impacted because without adequate water, you can't convert those macronutrients to energy. It just doesn't work very well. Those reactions require H2O, and inadequate hydration means your body starts preserving it to maintain your blood volume as opposed to performing some of those other functions. And then it could take at least 24 hours just to recover that tiny little dehydration. And if you have a hard workout and you haven't been drinking, it's very easy to lose that 1%. So how much do you really need to drink? Well, if you're a man between 19 and 30 years old and the requirements really don't go down much or change significantly after 30. So if any of you are over 30, I know these numbers are a little lower, you're still looking at about the same amount of water. Only when we start getting into really our 60s and beyond is there a measurable difference. But you can't go wrong because when it comes to water, if you drink too much, the good thing is, unless you chug a gallon at a time, in which case it can be toxic, you'll just pee it out. So it's very hard to negatively impact yourself by drinking too much. So a man would need to drink about 3.7 liters a day, which is 125 ounces, which is definitely more than 8 cups. It's about double that. And a woman should be drinking about 2.7 liters, which is 91 ounces, which is, again, about 11 cups of water, not 8. So again, this is for people who are physically active. And then plus any noticeable losses. And I mention that because losses through sweat are some of the biggest losses. And that's where we end up dehydrating because we're drinking. It's like, oh, I'm drinking. But we're just drinking our regular amount, not the extra sweat that your 5K run resulted in you losing. So how do you know how much to replace? Well, the only way to know is to actually measure how much you lost. And here's what you got to do. You don't have to do this every time, but a few times before your regular activity, you get naked, you weigh yourself, okay? And then you put your clothes on. you go for your run, then you come back, you take all those clothes off, you towel yourself dry, and you weigh yourself again. And the difference between your starting weight and your finishing weight is the amount of water that you lost that you should be replacing, because whatever you were drinking as you were running, I'll just keep using that as an example, wasn't enough to replace the loss. And so as a general rule, a pound of weight loss is equal to a pint of water, so 2 cups. You only need to do this a few times and you get an idea of how much you lose in sweat and how much you should be replacing. So just like anything else, and I say here, practice hydration methods that work for you. If you like ice water, drink ice water when you're doing your training runs. If you like lukewarm water, bring that with you. If you like hot beverages, that's fine as well, as long as you drink enough of them. As long as your, activity isn't hard and lasting more than an hour, for most of us, water is just fine. You don't need Gatorade or other things, but if that's your preference, that's fine too. Just make sure you account for the calories and practice drinking it before you do something that matters. So let's say you signed up for that marathon, or let's go with the 5K. You signed up for the 5K, you've been doing the couch to 5K, and you've been drinking something along. On the day of the 5K, do not pick up a bottle of a brand of power drink that you've never drank before and bring it with you. And if somebody offers you an energy gel or anything like that that you've never tried before, please do yourself a favor, don't take it. Food, eating and fueling yourself during any kind of physical activity requires just as much practice as the physical part of it. And as far as how much to drink, if you sip as you go, it's much easier than chugging an amount and then it kind of sloshes around in there while you're trying to do your activity until your body has a chance to absorb it. Small steady trickle is actually easier for your body to absorb than this like giant 2 cups at a time. Why is it important? Because water helps to maintain your body temperature. If you are dehydrated, you can't maintain your body temperature at an optimal level. And that can lead to bad things. Your body will also automatically, to protect itself, make you slow down. So that fatigue will set in quicker and so on. Your heart can't work as well. You don't get as much cardiac output, and that's moving the blood around and oxygenating it. Oxygenated blood, doing all that entire exchange if you are not hydrated properly. All of that adds up to premature fatigue, both mental and physical, and not giving you the results that you're looking for. This is a tough one, so hopefully I won't run out of time, but I do want to mention vitamins and minerals. I'm not going to spell them all out. There are a lot, but they are essential, to everyday life, and they are also important to any kind of athletic activity. The most important thing to remember about vitamins and minerals is that more than enough is not better than just enough. So huge amounts of vitamin supplements are not going to benefit you. There are, however, issues that can come out of it because, we all know, don't overdo it on fat soluble vitamins because they stick around in your body because we have fat as part of our bodies. And so they get in there and they are very hard to clear out unless they're used by the body, and they can become toxic. But we tend to think that water-soluble vitamins can't do us wrong. And if I take too much, it's better to take a lot because I could just pee it out. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that because the peeing it out comes at a cost. It can also lead to dehydration because huge amounts can be toxic, and so your body has to dilute it. But there's always a cost, right? So when you have excess ones, excess vitamins, you could be masking a deficiency in another area that you won't know about and your body won't feel until there could be permanent or long-term damage that you have to figure out how to undo. So it's a fine balance. If you're thinking about taking a supplement, if you're thinking about taking doses of one particular vitamin or another, I seriously encourage you to speak to a professional about that, because there are many things that can go wrong, even with water-soluble vitamins. And certainly there can be issues with minerals. All right, supplements, I definitely want to mention that. So supplements are really anything that's a non-food source of nutrients or compounds. So ergogenic aid, so really that's steroids or any kind of that type of substance that enhances performance. But vitamins and minerals, not in food form. So really anything that comes in a pill or a little powder or whatever, that is also a supplement, as are protein powders. Now, supplements tend to act in our bodies as a drug, but they are not regulated or treated that way. So there are risks associated with consuming supplements. They are, as long as you're eating a bright, colorful, and varied diet, odds are, unless you have a medical condition, which you shouldn't be self-diagnosing, you don't need them. But the risks are that they're not regulated, they are not tested. No one checks if the label matches, except for, if a company goes to a voluntary, like a testing independent company, which is a private company, not government. What's on the label doesn't have to be on the label necessarily in the bottle, and vice versa. What's in the bottle might not actually be listed on the label. So there have been many popular supplements that have been found to contain banned substances. Why is this important? Well, if you're just taking up sport and athletics for your own personal enrichment, that might not be so bad. But if you're taking any kind of medications for any conditions, that can lead to serious health consequences. If you are, or maybe you're here because you want to learn more for a competitive athlete, say for me, like my boys, it's important to know, because that can have athletic consequences for them. Should they be randomly chosen to be tested for something and they've been helping themselves to protein powder that contains something that might be on a banned list, without them knowing, they could be banned from a sport they love. So before you take any kind of supplement or consider taking one, I would recommend consulting a sports dietitian, somebody who's very familiar with this particular topic. Well, we have 3 minutes. So I don't know if I have time to go through all these, but I mentioned some of them. So myth 1, protein builds muscle. That's false. It takes work, energy, and a steady supply of the right kind of components in order to build muscle. If you don't work it, it's not going to grow. Eating more protein will help you build muscle faster, better, and easier. That's also not true. Just because you eat more of it, your body's only going to need what it used. So it's going to use what it needs, and that is appropriate to the amount of work that's being applied to it. Protein powders are optimized to make protein easier to use to build muscle. That's also false, because most of them are actually consisting of whey powder and a whole lot of fillers. So I'm not sure what optimization a whole bunch of really just fillers that go through you more than anything else have to do with anything. An egg has plenty of protein and nutrition, and at least to me, it tastes a little better. So protein is the most important thing I need to focus on to improve athletic performance. Getting enough to eat is the most important thing to focus on. If you eat a variety and you get enough to eat, you don't need to focus on any specific nutrient. Vitamins are good for me and performance, so more is better. That's definitely false, and we already talked about that a minute ago. Supplements are really never safe to use unless you have a lab in your home where you can test for yourself the safety of a supplement. Always approach any kind of supplement, no matter what claims there may be or whatever testimonials there are, with a grain of salt. In general, so here's a couple of things that generally come up. Joe went from skinny runt to ripped hunk by following a special diet. If I eat the same things, I will get the same results. Not unless you're Joe and you know, and you can somehow read his mind. It wasn't the diet that got Joe ripped. It was a ton of hard work at the gym, maybe. Other successful regimen doesn't actually guarantee yours. And besides, how much do you really know about what Joe did? And to get those results, because unless you follow Joe around, he might be selling you a whole bag of goods without actually sharing the whole truth. Janet used an energy gel at her last race, and it really kept her going to the end. I should use it in my next race. If you want to try it, that's fine, but make sure you try it several times in your training rather than trying it at a race. Drinking a protein shake, insert whatever remedy you want, before exercise or right after, speeds muscle building or recovery. I have to tell you, unfortunately, no one's found the magical recovery drink, but there are smart strategies to do. So fueling right before, maybe not immediately before, staying hydrated, and maintaining some sort of glucose supply if you're going to be exercising for a really long time, and then following it up with rehydrating, some carb, a little bit of protein, just to get your body healing right away, are the only things you need to do to sort of maintain your body and recover as fast as possible. There is no magic in a bottle for recovery. Bottom line, I threw a ton of information at you guys today, and I've barely scratched the surface. This is just a very brief overview from a course that I have online that has over 3 hours of video, presentations and materials. So I realized that I threw a lot of information at you. The most important things that I would like for you to take away of this is that if you don't consume adequate calories to support your physical activity, you could have suboptimal performance. If you don't drink enough, if you don't hydrate adequately, you will have suboptimal performance in your athletic activities. If you don't get enough carbohydrates, and if you don't like grains, that's fine, but fruit and vegetables are all excellent sources of carbs, you will have suboptimal performance in your athletic activity. Carbohydrate consumption is critical to performance and recovery. It's very important for recovery. It's something you want to hit your body with as soon as you're done, along with a little bit of protein. My favorite recovery, post-exercise drink, and something that I tell all my athletes to do, is forget about the fancy protein drink or whatever. Just get yourself those small bottles of Hershey's milk chocolate and drink one of those afterwards, because milk chocolate is actually the perfect post-workout drink. Why? Because the chocolate provides the easy, simple carbs that your body needs at the time in order to start the recovery process. And the milk contains slower acting carbs, but also protein to get you going on repairing whatever little tears or damage that has been done to your body. That's a natural part of the process. You've got, if you get that in you 10-15 minutes, within 10-15 minutes of finishing your workout, you're going to be way ahead of the game as far as recovering. You need less protein than you think. You're probably eating the perfect amount already. Steady protein is better than like a giant steak being your protein for the day in one mass. More than enough of a good thing is not better than just enough. And you need to practice fueling yourself and hydrating yourself just as much as you need to practice whatever athletic activity you have, as far as, whatever your choice is. If you remember some of these principles, I think you're going to do fine. Right, that's my really fast talking presentation for tonight.
Anna, that was fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing all that, because, we all think, maybe we don't all think, but I think a number of us might feel like we have a pretty good handle on our health. And you had some really excellent points tonight. I love the fact that you spent a lot of time on the hydration aspect of it all, and in particular too, the supplements and vitamin thing. That's sort of scary. How we can just get led down this path if we think we know what's right, but more does not mean it's better.
Right.
So I'm really excited that you're coming back to do another program, the recipe makeover program in February. And then for those of you that are watching, you'll see on the screen that Anna's also written a book, How to Eat Mindfully and Mindlessly Lose Weight. And she's going to be doing an author talk. And we're hoping to deliver that one in person the last Sunday in February. The library is open on Sunday afternoons during the winter. And so we are looking forward to hosting Anna at her author talk. And she will have her books for sale too. That's Sunday, February 27th, 2 to 3 p.m. And I noticed that there were some questions in chat, but it looks like you also answered them in the course of the conversation. So, the presentation here. So, does anyone have any other questions that they'd like to ask Anna now? And actually, before we get started on that path, I do want to say an official thank you, and I will let you know that we'll stop the recording of the video now. You'll be able to see it on our Granby Public Library YouTube channel in less than 2 days' time. And so let me just take care of that now.